Folks, welcome back to another episode of Coffee, Tea, and Crime. Today, the Beverly rooming house fire. Folks, we're in Beverly, Massachusetts. It's July the 4th, about 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, the fire department, they're out on an alarm call to a school there just down the street from the Elliott Chambers housing building. Now, one of the firemen there, he had been born and raised in that same neighborhood. Now, while they're sitting there dealing with what's going to be a false alarm at the school, he sees the silhouette of the Elliott Chambers building, and he commented at the time that he wished aloud that he'd never have to fight a major fire there. He said they called that building the Chamber of Horrors. Now, other firemen that had been involved in fire inspections of that building had noticed how they described it as a hive of rooms lining it's a pretty wide central hallway. It's a 3-story building. Now, they knew this old turn-of-the-century building was flimsy and corridors were lined with trash cans. Now, the firemen had said that they had practiced for years in the event a fire broke out there. And he made the comment that everybody knew that if there was a fire there wouldn't be anything but death. So now the firemen, they get done checking the Washington Beetle School, and they climb back up on their truck. They head back to the station. And they just got back to the station getting ready to lay back down, and police put out a report of a fire at the Elliott Chambers building. Now, the fire dispatcher, she's monitoring the police van. So when she hears that, she sends trucks that way. Now, within 2 minutes, they had 3 fire trucks on the scene. But already the fire was raging out of control. Now, they had a new fire chief. He'd only been there 2 days. And he told the initial firefighters, don't worry about fighting a blaze. Just grab every ladder you can, get to every window, and get people out of the building. Now, firefighters were able to rescue 8 people. Now, this Elliott Chambers, this rooming house, the fire that would occur on July the 4th, 1984, would be the deadliest fire in the history of the state, going all the way back to the Coconut Grove fire in 1942. And it was by far the deadliest fire in the history of the city of Beverly. Now, this building was 80 years old, 34 rooms on the top 2 floors. Businesses were on the first floor. It was a wood frame building. Now, this housing unit, it catered to deinstitutionalized mental patients, those that were disabled, substance abusers, the elderly, transients, low-income individuals. A lot of them had been placed there by the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health. Now, in the building, they had working smoke alarms, fire extinguishers, and emergency lights, and a fire escape. However, the building didn't contain firewalls, fire stops, or sprinklers. Now, according to the mayor's office and the building inspector and the fire chief, the building didn't meet the minimum standards for safety. Now, later, after they was able to put the fire down, investigation led to the conclusion that the fire started in an alcove and it moved across the flammable wooden paneling above the alcove, and it spread throughout the building through the unenclosed stairway. Now, the fire moved so quickly that it had reached the top floor by the time the fire alarm had sounded. Investigators also said that by the time most of the residents were awakened, access to the fire escapes were blocked by the fire. The top 2 floors, the second and third, were gutted. Only the first floor was somewhat intact. Now, there were 33 residents and 3 guests in the building, so you got 36 people inside that building. 13 people died. Second floor victims burned to death. Third floor died of smoke inhalation. 5 were found near a locked fire escape door, and 6 were still in bed. 14th victim died after jumping from the 3rd floor. 12 survivors were taken to the hospital. They also had to hospitalize 1 firefighter and 1 police officer. And then finally, a 15th victim died at the hospital on August the 5th, so a little over a month later. Now, according to the investigation, it indicated the cause of the fire was arson. According to investigators, the fire was caused by gasoline-soaked newspapers that had been lit in an alcove adjacent to the front entrance of the rooming house. Now, the investigation would later show that early evening on July the 3rd, our suspect, he was working at the Atlantic House of Pizza. Now, that's right near the Elliott Chambers rooming house. Now, in an alley adjacent to where the suspect worked, he encountered a fella who lived at Elliott Chambers. And the suspect told this fella, he said, "You better stop dating my girlfriend." Now, what he meant was his former girlfriend, because they had broke up. Now, the suspect told him, says, "I'm going to kill you and I'm going to burn your house down." Now, our suspect had told other people that, yeah, him and this girl had broke up, but he wanted her back. Now, between 3 and 4 a.m. on July the 4th, a cab driver had observed the suspect standing in front of the rooming house. And he saw a car that fit the description of the suspect's car parked next to the rooming house. Now, around 4 o'clock in the morning, a lady delivering newspapers saw a fella standing in the entryway to the rooming house, leaning over a stack of newspapers. She was not able to identify the suspect as the man she had seen. Now, another witness, fella, was delivering papers also to the drugstore that's adjacent to the rooming house. He saw a fella standing in the doorway of the rooming house smoking a cigarette. Now, according to him, the suspect was not the man he saw. But now our suspect here, he is the one they are looking at due to the threats he had made. Now, 4 years later, a witness would identify her in a police lineup, physical lineup. Said that was the fella he saw near the Elliott Chambers building. So on May 4th of 1988, so 4 years after the event, our suspect was arrested. He was charged with 15 counts of second-degree murder, 15 counts of assault and battery with intent to murder, and 1 count of arson. So the trial began on March 7th, 1989. And right off the bat, the judge declared a mistrial because the defense said the prosecution had held back vital information. So they retried the case November of 1989. November 22nd, 1989, our suspect was found guilty of the murder and the arson, sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. And they were going to put him in the Massachusetts Correctional Institution, which is maximum security. But they were going to put him in the area called Cedar Junction. Now, he'd be eligible for parole after 30 years. Now, the suspect's been eligible for parole since 2018. But now he has declined to ask for parole because he says he didn't commit the crime. And he's not going to accept responsibility for something he didn't do. Now, in 2022, the Innocence Project up in Massachusetts, they were still fighting to get him out. I'm very familiar with them on a case from Memphis. Now, as of April of 2024, they had hearings trying to determine if the suspect should get a retrial.